Hello everyone, this is Sam Spade with another tutorial in the Buttons Design and GameMaker Studio 2.3 series. In this tutorial, we're going to be making some sliders as a specific instance of a button that you can grab and hold and move around. I don't have any slides for this one, so let's just jump right over to the code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create our Grabable parent. Grabable parent. And we're going to need to be able to interact with this differently than normal. So we're actually going to have it inherit directly from button parent. We'll go over here and we'll make button parent. And now we want to set up how we're going to interact with it. And I'm going to talk about it before I do it. What we want is we want to be able to click on the button. And when we click on it, we want it to be grabbed. And then as long as we are holding the mouse button down, we want that object to follow around the mouse cursor in some way. We're going to do a slider, so we'll only move on one axis, but to follow around the mouse pointer in some way until the mouse button is released. So the first type of interact we need is mouse left down. And this will be our grab mouse button for the Grabable parent, which I just noticed I misnamed it over here or misspelled it. Let's fix that. And we want this to call event user 0, just like normal. But we also want to have our own event user 1. So event user 0 calls event user 1. So this will only fire if active, but this will be grab button for Grabable parent. And we'll say grabbed equals true. Now the next thing we need to do is as long as the left mouse button is held down, we want to be doing something. For that, we need to use the global left down button. We'll say button is grabbed, call event user 2. Grabable parent. If grabbed, event user 2. One thing I just noticed is this should not be left down. This should be left press. So we're going to change this event to mouse left pressed. There we go. So when we press the left mouse button, we'll check if the button is active. If so, we will grab the button. And as long as the left button is held down and the button is grabbed, we will call event user 2. And event user 2 is what we'll set up in the actual button. Next, we need a way to release the button. And for that, we're going to do mouse global left release. And this will just be release button. If grabbed, grabbed equals false. Next up, we need to initialize the grabbed variable. We'll come over here and do that in the create event. Grabbed equals false. So that's it for our Grabable parent. We will have one issue with this, which you'll see when we run it for the first time, but I want to demonstrate that first and then we'll come back and fix it. Okay, now we need to make the actual button. So we'll create a horizontal slider, call it object horizontal slider. We'll give it our normal sprite. We will make it a child of Grabable parent. And now remember, we are using event user 2 as what will happen as the event that will fire when the button is being grabbed. We want to come over here to event user 2. We'll say move slider for horizontal slider. And all we really need to say is x equals clamp mouse x and then x min, x max. Now, of course, we have to initialize those variables. And the way we're going to do it is we will inherit the create event and we will say that x min equals x start. And we will actually go to variable definitions and say that x max is something that we'll set up when we add it to the room. So let's come over and add it to our room. Remember that this will be x min Let's find out what we want X max to be, 340. So I'll move it back. And we will set X max to be 340. Okay, let's run it. All right, so here we have our slider. You can see it still hovers over, and now we can move it back and forth. But now you can see that we have a couple problems. First of all, while we can slide just fine, it isn't selected when we aren't over the button. The other thing that you can see is that we can select other buttons while we are sliding. The first issue is pretty easy to solve, so we'll do that here. The second issue will actually be much more complicated, and we'll have to create some additional objects, and we will do that in another tutorial. But let's solve the first issue. It's a simple solution. We just need to do two things. The first is we need to go to our mouse leave event, and we need to inherit it. We only want to inherit this event if we are not grabbed. If we are grabbed, we don't want to deselect. The other thing we need to do is come down to our release, our global release. What we need to say is if not position meeting mouse X, mouse Y, id, so this button, then image X scale equals 1 and image Y scale equals 1. Okay, let's run this and see if it works. So we have our button, we can still select it. It doesn't become unselected when we move off of it. And if we let go of it while we're selected, this doesn't change whether or not it's selected, but it will become unselected if we let go of it when we are not hovering over it. And as I said before, we'll fix this double hovering state in another tutorial. I want to briefly go over our two diagrams. This button would actually get a slightly different state diagram. When it receives input and is active, it will become grabbed, but then whether it goes to selected or not selected will depend upon whether or not the mouse is hovering over the button when the left mouse button is released. And then I have an updated inheritance chart, which I've done a couple things to. I have simplified the buttons. This makes it a little bit easier for me to understand. We added in the Grabable parent, and I just pretended we made two sliders, a horizontal slider and a vertical slider, which could both be children of the Grabable parent. And we still have our inheritance over here where we have the tap button parent, which has some concrete objects of its own, but it also has the toggle parent, which inherits from it and then has its own concrete objects. And then I've made a division between our abstract objects up here, represented by the parents, and our concrete objects down here. The parents will never actually exist in our game, but the concrete objects will. Instances of these objects are what our actual buttons are made of. And you could do this diagram in a number of different ways. It may even be helpful to have a couple different diagrams represent the same thing, each offering a different view into your code's architecture. But again, I think that making these diagrams, especially in a larger project, can be invaluable later on. They not only help cement what you've just done in your mind, but they give you an easy way to review it and refresh down the road or hand your code off to someone else. That's it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll be working on interacting with our buttons using the keyboard. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.